Blood Horse Plus, available through bloodhorse.com, provides exclusive, timely, and unmatched content to subscribers, including Fox Sports, Blood Horse branded weekly programs, a detailed stakes winners section, behind-the-scenes videos from Blood Horse staff, on-demand access to deeper horse statistics, and a $5 monthly credit to equineline.com. Upgrade to Blood Horse Plus today.
The heart of really what we come to do well is understand our clients.
Understanding what the needs of the family are.
Help them make some decisions.
Preparing the next generation for what's to come.
Being on a first name basis, getting to know their stories.
Working through their questions, their concerns, and figuring out the solution that's best.
They trust us enough to come in and help them solve that.
You really feel at the end of the day when you add value, there's a great sense of accomplishment and reward.
Henry David Thoreau once said, "It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see." In managing wealth, there's an awful lot to look at. Taxes and trusts, family meetings and bonds, and everything in between. It's why we rely on those who know each of these fields so deeply that they can see where others are merely looking, who can focus on what's best for clients over generations. After all, that's what expertise is.
Its presence fills the air. You can see it in the lush, verdant paddocks. Hear its whisper in the trees. The potential for greatness, it's part of the land. This is where stories begin, where first steps lead to thrilling finishes, where legendary sires like Nureyev, Sham, and Successful Appeal made their mark. Walmack Farm. It's more than just land. It's a legacy.
Okay, hey, my name's Gary Falter with the Jockey Club. Just like to welcome everyone to today's online panel. Now, this is the 8th panel in our series of 10 online Zoom panels this year in 2024. And today's panel, we're going to talk about the role of agents and advisors with owners. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to recognize our sponsors, starting with our presenting sponsors, which are the Green Group, Bessemer Trust, just saw their ad, and Stoll Keenan Ogden. And today, our panel sponsor, we also saw their ad, is Walmack Farm. Thank you, Walmack. And our Q&A sponsor is West Point Thoroughbreds. And our sincere thanks to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership and just helping us offer these webinars at no cost to you. And you can see on the screen the logos and the list of all the sponsors that make this possible. And our sincere thanks to all the sponsors. All right, so let's get started. I want to introduce our speakers today, and I'm going to start off with Braxton Lynch. Hi, Braxton. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So Braxton, she's a lifelong participant in the thoroughbred industry. She grew up outside of Unionville, Pennsylvania, spent her summers working for her father and her uncle's Walnut Green sales consignment. Braxton galloped horses at Delaware Park, at Fairhill, and in Newmarket, England. Her grandparents owned Christiana Stables, a racing and breeding operation that was originated back in the 1930s. Braxton is co-founder and racing manager of BBN Racing. She and her husband Damien also own and operate Royal Oak Farm, located in Paris, Kentucky. And Braxton currently sits on the KTDF Advisory Committee and the board of the Jockey Club Grayson Research Committee. She's also the former president of the KTA and the KTOB. All right, next I'd like to introduce Jeff Bloom. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so Jeff is a thoroughbred industry veteran for more than 40 years. He was a professional jockey, marketing and media relations consultant, and a broadcaster, in addition to now serving as the racing manager and bloodstock agent. Jeff founded and runs Bloom Racing Stable, LLC, which is a fully integrated horse racing company that offers portfolio management, bloodstock services, pinhooking, and other related investments. Next, we have Clark Shepard. Hi, Clark. Welcome.
Gary, thanks for having me.
So Clark is the founder of Shepard Equine Advisors. He specializes in pedigree analysis, sales representation, and portfolio management. Clark has helped many clients breed or buy countless top-performing racehorses, including the mating design of a Kentucky Derby winner. Clark is known for his honest and straightforward approach, and he combines experience with modern tools to guide clients in the thoroughbred racing industry. So I just want to let the audience know, if you have a question for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit your questions. And at the end of the panel, we'll answer as many questions as time allows. All right, so let's get started with the conversation here. So not all owners have an advisor. Some do, but some don't. And for those in the audience that don't have an advisor or an agent, can you give some insight about what a professional advisor like yourselves can do for an owner? And why don't we start off with Braxton, and then we'll have Clark and Jeff also jump in on this. So Braxton, what are your thoughts on, why it's important for a thoroughbred owner to have an advisor, an experienced person to rely on?
Yeah, I think anybody that's new to the business or hasn't had a lot of experience, an advisor can walk them through all the steps as not just to purchase a horse, but after purchase. There's a lot of things that take place to get the horse to the races. And we've all seen every aspect of this business. So upon completion of racing or dealing with injuries, there's just a lot of things that an advisor can help with that a novice wouldn't be able to do. Whether it's selling the horse at the end of its racing career, or helping it get to a farm and become a broodmare and everything. There's so many steps that people don't realize that they need to get the horse in the right hands all the way along to give it the best possible outcome.
Okay. Clark, so from an advisor point of view, is that something just for newcomers in the industry, or should most owners have someone to rely on to give them advice?
Most owners are remote. Most of them are people of means. They are businessmen. It's not their everyday business. So boots on the ground is invaluable to them, and, for the new guys, and even for some of the older guys, they know just enough to be dangerous. And I have a lot of my clients, I have a hard time just kind of tempering that, so that's almost a full-time job, is kind of keeping the enthusiasm down while still being realistic about it. Because, this isn't just about passion, it's about strategy. And, more times than not, I'm protecting people from themselves, and other aspects of the game too. So yeah, it's, an agent is an invaluable tool. And like she said, we've been through every aspect of this business, and that's broad. It's not just a matter of just buying a horse. I mean, you've got to go step by step by step.
Okay, Jeff, like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, to their point, there's a lot of touch points. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's really more about the subtle nuance of navigating through the various processes that are required. Whether you're talking about, we're talking about a broad spectrum, right? Whether you're assisting with the breeding process, whether you're assisting with acquisition of horses, whether you're assisting with the management of a horse's race career, and to Braxton's point about following their racing career. So, we all have those key relationships, and the unique benefit of having, a wealth of knowledge as it relates to the years spent, developing those relationships and understanding how to best maximize the potential of your client's investment, protecting your client's investment, and also ensuring that the client can enjoy themselves. It's all about, also having fun. And so, with an advisor / agent, you're helping facilitate all of that as best possible.
Okay. We all know some owners have entered the industry spending a lot of money, but they may not have had an advisor. After a short period of time, some of these owners become just kind of disenchanted with the results and end up leaving the sport. So how can a newcomer even find an advisor that they can get to know and trust? Where would they turn to be able to do that. Clark, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's all about networking, I think. And that starts at, just some owners will blindly go to the sales and just introduce themselves. That's what I recommend to people, or even go hang out on the backside, with the rail. Go to the races, go to events. You guys, you host events all the time. Just network. And there's always going to be somebody that knows somebody else, and if your work speaks for itself and you speak for yourself, that makes an impact on somebody, and hopefully they can share that with somebody else.
Okay, Braxton or Jeff, what are your thoughts on how a newcomer can find somebody they can know and trust?
Look, I think the important thing is for an individual that's fresh and new coming into the game, do your due diligence. The most important thing is aligning yourself with somebody that you can trust and that you enjoy their company, and have checked on sort of the background, right? There's a lot of information out there, and I think Clark brought up a good point. Sort of touch and feel it, and there's opportunities for people to experience getting introduced to individuals that can represent them, whether it's going to a racetrack or to a sale, or various websites that support information for people to identify how to locate an agent. And I would suggest that before somebody makes a decision, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to making sure that you trust the individual or individuals that you're working with, and it'll prepare them for ultimately having what is a good experience. And it doesn't hurt, like I said, to do the due diligence, check on references and past experiences for the individual you're looking to work with.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Braxton?
I would just add, ask as many questions and talk to as many people as you can. You'll find that the same names will come up, in good terms and bad terms. You're going to hear some good things and bad things. And so I think that the more that you can kind of filter that down, you're going to get a pretty good idea of somebody that you want to work with. And then when you call them, ask them a lot of questions. I think the other thing that a lot of people need to do is they need to manage their expectations, their own expectations. Because a lot of, people that I talk to, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, hey, I want to win the Kentucky Derby, and you're like, well, you know what? That's not that easy. So I think just managing their expectations and the people that they talk to about, starting slowly and don't just jump in all the way without really, knowing what can go wrong in this business and who you want to be with.
Okay. So when somebody new comes into the business based on your experience, do you all advise them on developing a business plan, or why it's important to have a business plan going into this, even if it's something very short? I mean, Jeff, what do you think? Is that something when you get a client that you help them kind of set those expectations and develop that business plan?
Yeah, I think in the very least, it's critical to the success of the operation to have some kind of vision relative to what the business objectives are. So identifying a plan associated with that business, I think, is crucial. And certainly it illuminates all of the key points along the way for an individual that's making an investment. Again, if they're talking about racing, all the constructs of a business plan support our industry. And I think that in order to be successful, that's something that you would definitely want to advise somebody that's entering into this. And no matter how small they're looking to start, it doesn't have to be an elaborate, formal, drawn out thing, but, all those key elements that will guide the process for them, and understanding, what their budget is and what their expectations for spend is over the course of a certain time frame, and all those components. I think it's important for somebody to have a good experience.
So Clark, do you ever have a client that comes in with such lofty expectations, and kind of like Braxton said, I want to win the Kentucky Derby, that you have to kind of reel them in a little bit?
Well, like I said, reeling them in is a full-time job a lot of times. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just like Jeff said earlier, it's very nuanced, and it's very dynamic business, and there's 1,000 ways to skin this cat. So that's what kind of excites me about dealing with clients, or especially new clients, is just sitting down and figuring it out, because A plus B doesn't equal C. There's no formula to this. So if I can kind of figure out where they're going, we can sit down together and put that strategy together, then walk it and then see it grow. Then that's when it happens, it's magical, So it yeah, that's all I've got.
Okay, all right, okay. So to avoid any misunderstandings, should an owner and an advisor enter into any kind of a written agreement if you're going to advise a client, or is a handshake all that's needed? I mean, just because I think a lot of people come into the business and they don't understand a lot. You guys understand nearly everything. How do you protect yourselves, and how do you make sure that you're on the same page? Braxton, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for somebody that you've sort of just met, I think it's definitely a good idea. If it's somebody you've been dealing with within the industry for a long time, and you know each other very well, I think sometimes a handshake will do. As long as, you've had the discussions and what they want to get out of it, and they know what the return is and what it's going to, what your fees are and that kind of thing. I think, it just depends, but for somebody coming into the business, I would say yes.
Okay. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my take on that is, I learned from a mentor many years ago, regardless of the relationship that you have with the individual that you're entering into a business arrangement with, it's always best to have some kind of written documentation to support what the understanding of the objectives are, what the relationship and what the expectations are. And oftentimes, I think that's played out better in close relationships. Anybody that I've done work with knows they can trust me, and the person I'm entering into that relationship, that's my expectation too. But there's no downside to having written out each specific identifier, each specific point that relates to the business that you're going to enter into with them. And it just seems to be a much simpler way to not have to address those kinds of issues down the road.
Okay. So, with our industry, we all know the highs are just wonderfully high and the lows can be just terribly low. I mean, is that part of the whole process of advising a client that they understand that coming into this, you can have some wonderful experiences and you can have some pretty difficult experiences. I mean, how much of that discussion goes on as you're consulting with a client? Clark?
I mean, that's how I start every relationship. I think it's paramount that you have those relationships and the expectations are there. Again, a lot of people can promise the upside, but it's those bottoms that are really, really hard, and those phone calls at 5 a.m, that something's gone wrong on the track.
Right.
And I shiver just to say that.
Yeah, but it does happen.
Oh yeah, it absolutely happens. But again, I don't want to downplay anything, but so I do a lot of baseball analogies. My son was a Division I pitcher, so I emphasize base hits. Okay, and look, success is relative too. It's not easy to win any race anywhere at any level these days. I mean, it's tough. So I emphasize base hits, and if you can just maintain, have fun, stay alive, and not try to force the home runs, because most of these big swingers that swing for the fences, they strike out a lot. So it's just base hit, maybe take a double. The home runs will generate themselves if you stay steady and focused.
Okay. So if an owner doesn't have an advisor, what are some of the pitfalls that they might experience, or maybe better said, what pitfalls can they avoid if they have an agent or an advisor bringing them along? So Braxton, what do you think if somebody has an advisor? What are some of the things they can avoid instead of going out on their own?
I mean, there's a whole list of things they could avoid. I think it just goes back to, a lot of us have experienced things in this game that, by hindsight, we go, why didn't we see that coming? Or I don't know whether it's, I mean, there's just too many things to even, bring up. But from our experience, we've learned, from making mistakes. Everybody learns from making mistakes along the way. So I think that, that's the key thing is somebody coming in fresh, they're going to make mistakes. So an advisor can help them to not make those mistakes. I think one thing that comes to mind is like dealing with the vetting at the sale. If you listen to a vet tell you, well, there's this in the ankle and there's this in the knee and there's this and it doesn't mean anything to anybody, but somebody, they go, oh my gosh, there's all these things wrong with this horse. But really there might not be anything wrong with the horse as far as racing soundness. And so an advisor can help them say, you know what, that's not a big deal. That is a big deal. Same with conformational issues. I think it's not just pedigree. I think a lot of people can come in and say, oh, I know Uncle Mo's a good stallion and this mare could run. Let me buy this horse. It's not that easy.
Okay. Jeff or Clark, you want to add anything to that, the pitfalls they can avoid?
I mean, look, there's just a lot of landmines out there. So we have the domain expertise that you hope over time you can help transfer some of that knowledge. But like as Braxton was saying, there's just so many factors. There's so many intangibles. There's so many variables that we could talk for hours about how to navigate around, how to position one to be as successful as they can possibly be. Look, if you can control the things that you can control, like in other words, there's a lot of things that you can't control, but the things that you can control, if you can guide and represent an individual away from those spots that are going to get him into trouble, now at least you have a chance, because things are going to go wrong regardless. The key is just, keeping people out of trouble that you can keep them out of trouble from.
Okay.
Gary, I often do an analogy of like a maze. You've got a horse that starts at the maze, and there's 110 turns that could go wrong, and there's only one way to get through to the top to get the champion. It's difficult, but you can help get through that maze a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, again, a lot of that too comes down to when you're advising for someone or representing an individual's business. We have relationships, whether it's with the veterinarians, whether it's with the trainer, whether it's with the riders, whether it's with the racing office, the various connected points that allow you to get to a success point. And so we're leveraging those relationships, and we, hopefully can take advantage of leveraging those relationships based on those years of experience and know how to best position the athlete to the right spot.
Okay. I remember Dan Rosenberg told a story, Braxton, once about he and his vet were out looking at horses for their client, a very experienced owner. And the owner was sitting in the sales pavilion, and a Stormcat colt walks in the ring, and he buys him for $60,000 when the stud fee was $200,000. And when they got together, they looked at their notes because they'd already looked at the horse, and the horse had some issues that would keep him from racing. And that owner said, well, I probably should have known better. I probably should have checked with you guys first. But, it could happen. It happened even to the most experienced owner. So let's jump into talking about the whole auction and sales arena, public auctions, private purchases. So what do you feel are the most important things that an owner should consider when they buy a horse at public auction? So they want to buy some yearlings. What are the things they should consider when you're advising them on horses to purchase? So Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
So look, we all approach it differently, right? As agents, and how we go about evaluating talent and prospects. For me, anybody that has experience and knowledge about a horse's conformation, horse's pedigree, those are things you can teach, and those are things people can learn over time. It's really the sort of 10,000 hours, that intangible thing, so my background is so varied, and all the different experience points, whether it was on the back of a horse, being with other experts who work with the horse, veterinarians, etc., and then trying to apply that kind of stuff to finding a prospect that slips through the cracks. And where I'm going with this is it's the intangible. It's the stuff that you really can't teach somebody. It's that gut instinctual thing that you're hoping to see in a horse's presence, a horse's reaction to things, the way a horse carries itself. In addition to that, when you're trying to buy at value, you have to forego something. We can all pick out stellar pedigree and horses that have proper conformation. But when I'm buying based on value, I'm having to let go of some of the obvious. So I try to tell my clients or walk them through that process in where I'm going to be able to get a horse, say, at a discount because it has some conformational issues, but the horse's mechanics overcome those issues. So it's my long way of getting to, there's a lot of us out there buying horses, but for me, the biggest part of it is that intangible component that is really something you can't see on paper or in a picture or a video of a horse. It's sort of the horse's sort of presence and its actions.
Okay. Clark, you just finished the September sale. What are some of the most important things, about the sale that an owner needs to know about as you pick out horses for him?
Well, and to me, it's like he said, everybody goes through the same, not the same process, but it's all very, very similar, But to me, I'll drop back to strategy and having a game plan and having a budget, sticking to your guns, and knowing and especially the new guys, buying the horse is I won't say it's the easy part, but if you have the money, buying the horse is the easy part. It's the management, it's the heartache, it's the everything on the backside that they don't understand, especially the costs. It's going to cost you money for somebody to just give you a horse, and that right. Doesn't go through their mind. They like, I have $50,000 and I'm gonna buy a horse for $50,000. Okay, that's the easy part. Mm-hmm. So that's what I try to drive home, and that's what they need to know before they even go to the auction.
Okay.
I did want to add, that's like, so the thing I left off is you have to, or you don't have to, but I think it's important to assign a value. A lot of times people ask, like, especially if you give them the horses you think you're looking at to buy for them, well, how much is this horse going to cost? With the markets the way they've been, I don't even try to guess anymore what horses are going to sell for because it's an order of magnitude off. What I do get very specific about is I assign a value. Here's what I think this horse is worth. And if we can get the horse for that, that's great. If we can get it for less, that's even better. Don't need the validation of the market to tell me that the horse should be this much. And it's critical to the success. Like Clark was saying, understand what the budget is. You've got to be disciplined. The system will break if you constantly overpay based on what your value expectations are. So stay disciplined, assign a value. Whatever the market's doing, you can't control that, but you can control what you've assigned as a value.
So Braxton, off Jeff's point, you assign a value on a set of horses. How often do you actually get those horses? Is it something that you just have to have clients with deep pockets, or do you draw the line and maybe only get 2 out of 10 horses purchased? I mean, how often do you go? I guess what I'm asking, how often you go to the sale and you fill out all the ones you want to purchase?
What I was going to say to the previous question is, have a plan, but be adaptable. And the plan to me should not be, I want a 2-year-old, or I want a grass horse, or I think the plan should be, go get me an athlete that can win some races. And then you say, okay, well, this, we've got outbid on 5 or 6. We're going to, we think this one is really nice. You might have to just increase your budget slightly to get this one. Or, you bought one for less before, now we can increase to get another one. So you have to be adaptable in that. And the same thing about adaptable is you've got to be able to like Jeff was saying, you have to be able to live with some flaws, because we've all been in the place where we love a horse. Like, we have a team that we work with. Every time we all love it, it is out of our price range, like without a doubt. So it's like, great, we all love it. What's the next horse coming along? Because we're not going to be able to get that. So you have to be able to be adaptable. As far as how many you strike out on, it's just relative to what, owner you're dealing with as much. But if you just, keep on grinding it out, you'll come up with some horses. And it was hard this September. We ended up averaging the same average we had last year. We got the same number of horses. You just have to keep on being there, and something will fall into your price range that you like.
So I'm kind of curious, are you overly cautious to recommend to a client to stretch themselves beyond what they were willing to spend, or are you more cautious to kind of bring them back? I mean, how do you handle that with an active owner?
I think sometimes at the sale, the agents tend to stay pretty calm about getting outbid on things. That's fine. We'll move on to the next one. But sometimes the owners don't understand. They feel like they're missing out on the one they could have had, or they get their heart set on something and it doesn't work out. And then they go and spend more on something they shouldn't. So I think just that's where the reeling in kind of comes along. You shouldn't base what you're going to spend on a horse based on what time your flight leaves this afternoon. You don't need a horse that badly. We'll get you a horse.
So I take it sometimes you'll advise a client, Clark, Jeff, to say, no, that's far enough. Let's move on.
Yeah. And again, touching on what Braxton said, I'm gonna search for that athlete first. And it doesn't matter. So the sire and the page is going to dictate the price that we're going to have to pay for that athlete that you like already. So it's kind of in reverse. But you got to set the limit, so whenever I advise prices, I have a value range, a high and a low value range. And then I've got that match the pedal price. If you think you've got to have this horse, this is it. And you know what, if it goes over that, good luck.
Okay. All right. So instead of buying at public auctions, many owners, they like to make private purchases to fill their racing stable. So what are some of the advantages or even disadvantages of buying horses privately versus going to public auction? And Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, one of the most obvious things is sort of, now you've got ready-made. Here you go. You've got a aftermarket product that can go to the races theoretically, based on a veterinary evaluation. And to that point, you can get much more detailed in terms of your ability to evaluate the horse's soundness based on a thorough post, race veterinary evaluation. Also, you have sort of a broader market in that you don't necessarily need to limit yourself here to the domestic US. I mean, you can go abroad. And most of us agents have purchased or helped acquire horses privately through different relationships we have in various racing regions, right? So there's lots of opportunity out there to identify horses that might fit a certain bill for a client that's looking to do something, whether it's buying a horse that goes long on the turf or a horse that's already shown its ability, if you will. So you've taken out a lot of the question with, an unproven young horse where, you're buying on the come, as opposed to a horse that's already proven. You've seen what kind of numbers they run, and you can sort of extrapolate what upside is there. You're typically going to pay more of a premium, based on a horse's proven assets, but at the same time, there's deals to be made on horses buying private land. And in addition to that, you can still buy prospects off the farm. I mean, many of us have done that as well, pre-sale. Sometimes sellers are motivated to sell before a horse is going to go to auction. And most of us agents will be visiting farms pre-sale, right? Where we're getting access to viewing a lot of horses. And so that's another way to take advantage of maybe buying a horse at less of a price, based on the motivation of the seller. So those are some of the things that tie into private sale.
Okay. Braxton, BBN Racing, do you guys do private purchases or everything coming from the auctions?
We don't. We do well, for the most part, we do everything coming from the auctions. We bought into horses before, one horse that was ready to be made and ended up being Concrete Rose. So we had a lot of inside detail on that one, and that was sort of mutually beneficial to the seller that retained 60% and 40% to us. So that one just kind of worked out. But I do think you get to really go a little bit more in depth in detail. You have a little time to think about it. It's not like split second in the auction. You don't get caught up in that kind of frenzy of the auction.
Okay.
So I think you have more time.
Clark, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's just, obviously less competition. You've got more control of the price in the negotiation power, which if everybody comes to terms, may create value for you. I mean, that's just kind of the obvious deals. It's not the hot pace of the sale. It's within your own terms.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about the auction process, about maybe private purchase. What about the owner that wants to breed their own racehorses? I mean, do you guys get involved, or do agents and advisors get involved in advising an owner on breeding, and especially breeding to race, and in addition to that, breeding for commercial sales? So, Jeff, what are your thoughts on, advising a client that wants to get into the breeding side?
Be patient. But yeah, we look, there's a lot of different aspects to this business, and diversification is a good thing too, depending upon what a person's objectives are and interests. We do help with breeding in terms of matings and actually everything from sort of relationships with the farm and the game plan associated with their breeding operation. If somebody's willing to, I mean, breeders can sell commercially, and they can breed commercial to sell or breed to race. And if they're willing to do both, they can protect their investment a little bit better in terms of how they control the mare's progeny. So there's a lot of detail that's associated with sort of understanding what the objective of the owner is. But yes, in the long answer is, we do get involved with assisting clients on the breeding side of things as well.
Okay, so Clark, you're one of the pedigree experts that I know. You advise clients on matings, I would assume, and on pedigrees and crosses and nicks. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's like Jeff said, it's all totally up to the individual. That's, if somebody says, hey, I want to get in the horse business, that's not my first avenue of where they should be. My first avenue is, let's go weanling to yearling pinhook, something like that. Definitely don't start them at racing unless that's what they want, But again, you have to explain everything to them. It's a costly process. It's a long drawn out process. The mare's got to get in foal. She's got to put a viable foal on the ground. And, more times than not, you can buy a weanling cheaper than what you could breed the mare for and then bring them up to that point. So it's just kind of, it's what they want. And, there's some guys that they don't care about any of that. And it's just, they've got the money and they want to do it, period. Okay. And in those circumstances, it's almost a legacy type of a aspect for them. They've got the mare, they're putting these out, either they're racing them themselves or they're selling them. So that's kind of like their kids out there representing the legacy part of it. So
Gary, the hardest thing I come across is when, say, a client's got 5 foals, 2 of them are outstanding individuals with commercial pedigrees. They're their nicest foals. They want to keep those and race them, and they want to sell the ones that aren't quite up to snuff. They're not getting much return for the ones they sell. They're taking a big risk on the 2 that could have brought a lot of money. So I try to you don't want to sell something that's going to end up being a huge stakes winner that everybody really liked, but you want to generate some income for them. So it's really there is a little bit of a catch-22 in there sometimes.
Okay, all right. So just want to remind the audience, we still have several questions to go over with the panelists, but if you have a question for one of the panelists, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit that, okay? So each of you guys have extensive experience selecting horses for owners. And one of the most important aspects of your job is to try to sort out horses that have poor conformation that could impact their racing careers. But on the other hand, most owners are novices at best at evaluating conformation. So can we talk about how conformation evaluation should be left to experts like you all versus a novice like myself? So, what are your thoughts, Braxton, on owners going out there and trying to evaluate conformation on horses, and especially a newcomer?
Yeah, I'd say it's extremely difficult for a newcomer. As we've said before, we've seen, tens of thousands of horses, whether it be at the yearling sales or weanling sales, or, at the races, and I think, you can't just look at a conformation book and then go out and say, well, this knee looks good to me. And like, it can't be done, because there's the way horses move through things. And so I think the best thing to do is just go out there and see as many horses as you can before you actually put some money down. There's a lot of flaws that I don't like in horses. With our team for BBN, we shortlist, and the trainers go through and look at the short list. And sometimes they're like, you know what, I can live with that. And I'm thinking, ooh, I don't know, but I don't have to see it every day. I don't have to train it every day. If they can live with it, I'm good with it. So, there's just a lot of, it all comes down to experience with these things. And if you have no experience and you're going to go try to purchase a horse, very, very difficult.
I mean, Clark, what are your thoughts on, an owner going out there and just looking at horses? I mean, what are some of the tangibles that you guys can see that the average person just doesn't see because you've seen thousands and thousands? And how quickly can you see those conformation issues on a horse that it would take somebody new hours?
Well, I mean, there's a long list of things that you look at, and yeah, I won't say that instantly, because what I look for initially is just balance, and then I'll start to break the pieces down from there. But I'll know based on balance and how they walk, I'll know them within the first few seconds. But back to the question about cutting somebody loose to buy a horse, every horse looks good to them because they're excited, and for all of us, like I said, we know, but they don't. And I think that's all the reason that they need somebody until they learn. And I like for clients, I just don't want a blank check from anyone. I want them to come walk with me. I want them to see what I see, smell what I smell, hear what I hear, and hopefully they can learn from that. Mm-hmm. And I've got one guy, he's actually starting to get pretty good at it. I may have worked myself out of the position. But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, for sure.
Okay. So like at a yearling sale, Jeff, you look at a lot of horses and you look at their walk. I think Clark just said that. I'm sure Braxton did too. What is it about the walk that you look for in a horse?
Yeah, so to add to what we were talking about before, whether I'm looking at a horse, say at a baby sale, or looking at a horse at a 2-year-old in training sale, I'm first going to look at that horse to see what I like, not what I don't like. If I like a horse, I'll start breaking it down after that, because again, I'm doing value purchasing. And so one example is a horse that earned 7 figures, a horse by the name of Snapper Sinclair. He's a perfect example of a horse that's back at the knee, which is, that's a bad thing, or it can be in terms of a horse's ability to stay sound, but it was the horse's mechanics, the way he moved through that defect, if you will. His way of walking and his motion was perfect for that defect. In other words, he wasn't causing undue stress. And so to your question about looking at a horse's walk at, say, the yearling sale, I'm looking at fluidity of motion, a horse's sort of how much ground they cover, the swagger that they have, swagger's key, and the movement of their body. And also going back to Clark's point, the balance of a horse, because we're looking for athleticism in these horses. And so you could have a perfectly conformed horse that just doesn't have a great walk. I like to see a big, fluid, efficiency. Efficiency of motion for me is the #1 criteria when it comes to buying young horses and old horses. It's their efficiency of motion. That right there is sort of the key sort of driving thing for me in particular.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but some of these, you know, everybody's trying to teach the big walk with these horses, and we're seeing more and more of sort of forced big walks, if you will. So I think there's some things you can kind of navigate away from when a horse is walking with its head 1 foot off the ground. You know it's not going to gallop that way. So why are we watching it walk that way? Well, it's because it's getting a bigger, longer stride because of that. So I think, you know, you need to sort of figure out which horses are doing it naturally and which horses are kind of being prepped to do that.
Great point.
Let me add one thing too. I mean, if we can check off all of our boxes and we're ready to go, the factor that just pushes it over the top is if you stare that horse in the eye, it's just you can kind of read his soul. And there again, back to the gut, what you were talking about, Jeff, just those little intangible things. You know, if a horse doesn't have a confident eye and he doesn't like look right straight back at you and stare you down, you start to question his heart a little bit, you know?
Yeah, that's the stuff you can't train, right? They either have that or they don't.
Right.
It's also the hardest thing to really, you can't teach that to somebody. You know, it's just something you feel, it's organic, and you hope that again, I go back to that 10,000 hours of experience thing, sort of transfers into that success ratio. Because you're right, Clark, it's all about staring them in the eye and that presence that they have, that demeanor, that desire.
And that I will tell them give them away too, if it's a matter of temperament, be it shy or be it crazy, which those aren't two good factors for racehorses.
Yeah, when you're a jockey and you walk into the paddock, you look at their eye and this is gonna be a fun post parade.
And I'll just add to that as a seller, you know, a lot of these horses are out there for basically 48 hours, come off the farm that they were raised on, and it's all very new and different. That some of them handle it better than others. It doesn't always mean that these horses won't, you know, gain confidence in a different setting and be a little bit, you know, more confident as they're being broken and things like that. So yes, I agree with you guys. The intangible, the look in the eye, those, you know, you can see that in some of those horses, but I think you know, there's some good horses that are out there a little wide-eyed. You know, they're still good horses.
So is that why some agents will go to the farms to look at horses prior to the sale because they're in their natural environment and they haven't been out of the stall 120 times?
Yeah, that and just the time factor. It's just so much easier if you can see some horses on the farms.
Oh, sure.
The numbers
Okay.
at the sale.
Yeah. Okay. So just kind of as a follow-up to that question about you know, selecting horses or you know, disqualifying horses based on conformation, are there cases where a horse with poor conformation that causes the horse to go unsold, or maybe the horse doesn't bring much, ever end up doing quite well?
All the time.
All the time? Okay.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And by the way, if you're to go into the paddock right before a race for any graded stake race, especially for some of the mares, and you look at how those horses are put together, 70% of the time you're going to see horses and go, whoa, boy, does that horse turn out? Or, you know, there's all kinds of, so fast is fast. And again, that comes down to, it's not all about a horse's, obviously the better conformation, the better, but a horse's mechanics, a horse's heart and desire can overcome a lot of conformational defect.
Okay. 2-year-old sales versus yearling sales. I mean, yearling sales, you're looking at the walk, you're looking at the horses, just how it handles itself. How different is it at the 2-year-old sales? Because these horses are on the racetrack. You get to see them gallop. You get to see them breeze. I mean, do you guys have a preference one over the other? Or is it just a different evaluation because the horse is further along when they're a 2-year-old?
I'll tell you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna say, it is a different evaluation, but it's a huge advantage to be able to see a horse at a 2-year-old sale, right? Because now you're taking it one step further. Less guesswork in terms of how a horse moves, so for me, the time is almost irrelevant. And by the way, when is a horse ever going to have to go 10 flat again? It's not so much the time. I mean, pretty much any thoroughbred racehorse can be trained to go really fast for 1/8 of a mile if the person's good at doing that sort of thing. So being able to see a horse pre-breeze, being able to see the horse, how they act on the racetrack with or without the pony, how do they come to the pole, how do they move through the work, and more importantly, how do they level out after they've actually gone through that breeze? And then on top of that, being able to go back to the barn numerous times and seeing how the horse has reacted to all of that stuff that's been thrown at them is a huge advantage in terms of taking some of the risk out of it. Now, it takes a lot for these horses, what they go through and are put through to get to a 2-year-old sale and do those sorts of things, but you're taking a ton of risk out of the equation by being able to see a horse actually gallop and work and seeing what their mechanics fully are.
For me, it's a budget thing. You know, I have people that buy horses in the $100,000 range, and I think you've got a higher chance of finding something to fall through the cracks at the yearling sale at that price than you do, you know, the 2-year-old sale where, and obviously, you know more about those horses, but you know, the ones that are perceived good, the price is, you know, out of reach for a lot of people at the 2-year-old sale.
I think it used to be that way a lot more. Like it really, that should be the case, because as time goes on, you should be paying more based on what you're getting to see. But for my program, strangely enough, more value and more success has come at lower prices at 2-year-old sales. But again, it's all about thinking out of the box and trying to not go after the obvious. I mean, people are looking for the sizzle at the 2-year-old sales. The sizzle's obvious to see. It's all about trying to find, you know, go against the grain, so to speak. And so when you can identify those opportunities at a 2-year-old sale and actually pay less for it, it's a huge advantage. But on paper, theoretically, you should be paying more. And oftentimes I've found that we're not.
Okay. Do you feel at the 2-year-old sales, they have to breeze to get your attention? Or, because I think some 2-year-old consigners are not doing that, or they're galloping the horses, or they maybe 2-minute licking. Well, what are your thoughts? Is it something that you have to see them breeze to get excited about them?
It sure helps. I mean, to compare apples to apples, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's not, you don't have to. Touching back on what everybody started on this question, I may do things a little backwards at the 2-year-old sale, because I'll still will go do that sale the same way I do a yearling sale. I go scripted based on pedigree analysis. I'll go find the individual first, and then I'll let the work or the time or whatever dictate or basically say, oh, you were kind of right. But if he doesn't live up to, it doesn't move the way he looks at the barn, or, you know, then you pass.
Okay.
But if that verifies what I came to see, then the pieces kind of all fit together there. That makes sense.
The most successful graded stake winners that I've had in acquiring at 2-year-old sales were far from the fastest breezes.
Right.
They were not the obvious breezes. It's
Really?
how they did it.
Okay.
Keep in mind, I literally watch every single horse breeze. I'm there at the live breeze show, so I'm able to. So my process is different than somebody else's, right? There's no right or wrong really, but so my process is I'm watching that first, and oftentimes seeing many of those horses before they actually go through their breezes. You know, when I go to visit farms, but it's a lot of work, and there's a lot involved in all of it. And the key is just, you know, having your methodology and having it work for you.
Okay. Well, we've been at it for about 55 minutes. And so I've got one more question before we go to the Q&A from the audience. And so So you guys are agents and advisors. So how does someone become an agent or an advisor to owner? And is there an organization that they have to join, or talk about how do you go about establishing yourself as an advisor?
Have a business card made that says advisor, and now you are officially an advisor in the racehorse industry.
All right.
That's a good question. It's a fair question, but I think it's a very informal sort of long history of individuals who have come up different ways in the business that found their way into acting as an advisor for clients. My path was different than Clark's and Braxton's, and guys, there's no official formal organization that provides oversight and certification that I am aware of.
Should there be?
I don't think so myself.
Okay, fair.
It's up to the owners to do their due diligence.
Okay.
It's like, okay, I'm not saying the real estate exam would be easy, but you can study for the real estate exam, you can be a real estate agent. Okay, just because of that. Just because you can study up for some kind of a test and get some kind of certification, that does not give you experience or gut feel or any of that. It takes time, and it takes a lot of hard work down in the trenches. That's why we're all sitting where we are today. I at least one call, one direct message, one email a week. Hey, I want to be a Bloodstock agent. What do I need to do? How much time do you have? Right? It sounds sexy, but it's not it's not a cookbook recipe. It's just, you can't just snap your fingers and do it.
Yeah.
I started at 13 and a half years old.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just need to put the miles in. I mean, just go out there and look at horses, follow those horses, the ones you liked, follow them and see what they did. Go work for a trainer, go work for a Bloodstock agent. That's the way you build your knowledge base.
Okay.
And Gary, real quick.
Go ahead.
Someone called me the other day and I told him, I said, what are you good at? Well, I don't know. Well, okay. Go find out what you're really, really good at and give it away for free for a long time. Prove yourself. That's a start.
Okay. All right. So that kind of wraps up our discussion. So we're going to move into our Q&A session. But while I sort through some questions, we're going to hear from our Q&A sponsor, West Point Thoroughbreds. So we'll be right back in about 30 seconds.
How do you become the gold standard in racing partnerships? One horse, one partner, one victory at a time. Congratulations to all our partners who have made West Point the gold standard for the last 3 decades.
Okay, so we're back. First question. Do you have veterinarians check both the physical and the repository on all the horses that you plan to bid on? Who'd like to take that one?
I'll take that one. Our veterinarians do a physical in the stall. So they'll check the knees and the ankles and, the eyes and heart rate and things like that. I do not ask them to tell me if the horse is offset in the knees or toes in or, this or that. And then of course they scope and look at x-rays, but yes, a physical in the stall is a yes for me.
Okay.
It's important for me to, the one thing I can't stress enough is I don't want to start from behind for ourselves or for a client. There's no point in doing it. So yeah, any horse that's going to be purchased, I have my vet I have a vet I use for the baby sales and a vet I use for the 2-year-old sales that I've worked closely with for years. And we speak the same language. Philosophically, we understand what we're each looking to accomplish. which is important. And what I mean by that is what I can live with, what they know I can live with. And so, yes, they'll hit the repository, evaluate the scope, do a physical on the horse. To Braxton's point, I'm not looking for them to tell me again about conformational issues. I do want them to catch something if there's something about an eye issue or, those matters. So they'll do a physical on the horse, but it's not about conformation.
Okay. Next question. When you're considering horses to purchase for an owner, in your view, what's more important, pedigree or conformation, and why? Clark?
Well, at the end of the day, it's confirmation,
Okay.
but verified through pedigree after the fact.
Okay. Anybody else?
For me, it's confirmation. I mean, if the way I look at it is a very good racehorse can make the page.
Okay.
For me, it's not black and white. It's all of the above. Athleticism, but it all gets put into the same. Every horse is different, so it's why it's the athlete, the individual.
Okay. Next question. How do most agents and advisors charge for their services? Are there monthly retainers, salary, commissions, flat fees? So how's that normally done for most agents and advisors?
Well, I think go ahead, Clark.
Most of my clients, they prefer the retainer approach. And then there again, it's kind of cradle to grave. There's every aspect of management is thrown in there. There's kickers, within those retainer contracts. But I ask for very little up front because I like the work to speak for itself. And look, you make results for guys, they're going to take care of you. But I do have what I call a la carte guys that, the one-offs. But I like being part of the whole process, and you'll hear me say we a lot. And it's usually those guys that I'm doing everything for, retainers.
Okay. Jeff, anything?
Yeah, look, it's sort of the typical agent-client relationship. It's really kind of counterintuitive if sort of like to Clark's point about an a la carte, somebody comes to you and you get a commission for buying a horse, and you look at it and it's like, well, the more the agent makes more money, the higher the price of the horse is. So it's really sort of an odd business relationship as far as I'm concerned. So I think a better relationship is more of along the lines of what Clark's talking about, where you have sort of a defined program, sort of a compensation structure that's based on a comprehensive service that you're providing to the individual. There's nothing wrong with a sort of one-off here and there commission for buying a horse, with the upfront understanding that there's a very specific budget. And more often than not, I'm the one holding the buyer to a lower price than a higher price. But you just want to be careful with that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
And I've done myself, I've done 5% commission, which I think is pretty industry standard. I do have a cap, which basically means if I spend, 300,000 or 3 million, I'm not getting paid any more than the 300,000 or, around that number.
Okay. So a commission with a cap. Okay.
Yeah, that just
and also
adds a little bit of a trust within.
Sure.
There should almost be, it's sort of a reverse sort of situation. It's really hard to identify and purchase horses at a huge discount. And if you make a living, which we have off of doing that, there shouldn't be a disincentive to accomplish those feats for an individual, right? I mean, if you're spending $50,000 for a horse that's winning Grade 1 races instead of $1 million for that horse, it's harder to find those less expensive horses. So that's why typically, if you're in a relationship with a client, you have sort of a plan associated with that compensation structure, which, to Clark's point, once you've proven yourself with them, that you're sort of incentivized on the back end. If things work out and you've shown that you can be successful for them.
Yeah, I've dealt with some before that do a small percentage, like a 1 or 2% upfront, and then it's based off of a maiden win, an allowance win, a stakes win, a certain percentage of or a certain number for each of those accomplishments. It's like, if they do well, the agent does well.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
They call that a win-win.
Yeah, it is. Here's a question about a horse that has excellent pedigree, conformation, but the vet report has some areas of concerns. Maybe the throat scope isn't perfect. X-rays have some issues. So how important is the vet report when selecting horses for owners? How important is that?
It's important whether the horse is a very inexpensive horse or a super expensive horse. You know, there's two things that are really tricky, especially if you're buying a young horse, and it's throat and knees, or certain areas within the knee that you just don't want to start with. But every veterinary situation is different. So again, that comes down to getting to the specifics and having a really good relationship with your veterinarian so that they can explain to you where you're at on that. Oftentimes, if I like a horse, I sometimes love, like, oh shoot, there's only a couple of ankle chips. I'm going to save some money here. I think the pinhookers maybe can't go there, you know. So it just depends on the vet issue.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think avoiding the major issues is the key. You know, like your example on the Storm Cat for $60,000, it'll never race. I mean, you know, you can avoid. There's one of your pitfalls you can avoid.
Sure. Okay.
Well, we always want to find value too, you know, and there are some things that I can live with, but at the end of the day, if I wouldn't buy it for myself, I'm not gonna buy it for somebody else, especially if it's questionable, borderline questionable, because God forbid something happens, and that's the reason.
Okay.
Yeah, starting from behind is no fun.
It is.
There's a lot of horses out there, so
they do a good enough job messing themselves up later.
I will say real quick, you know, I'm really happy that they're doing some of these studies on X-rays, because there were a lot of X-ray issues that were perceived as very bad that are coming back after the research that are, you know, not necessarily as bad as we thought they were. So I think, you know, I think there needs to be more of that. And I think as the repository from when it started to where it is today, I think the veterinarians are treating it, at least the veterinarians that I've dealt with are treating it with a sort of low risk, moderate risk, high risk kind of thing, instead of a yes or a no.
Yeah, and I also think anecdotally, based on all of our collective years of experience, we can point to certain issues, veterinary issues that horses may or may not have had, and what the success rate was of those horses. You know, sort of you have your own repository, if you will, of experiences with certain veterinary issues on horses that you've either purchased or followed that you didn't purchase.
Yeah.
And Gary, one point that I will make, some of those issues are hereditary. That horse happens to be by that sire or from that family, and it's the same, then you kind of got, you can either live with it or you can't, based on that.
Sure. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that wraps up the Q&A. So I'd just like to tell the audience that if you have any follow-up questions for our panelists, please use the email contact information on the screen to ask any follow-up questions of our speakers. And you can come back to this. We're going to record this whole session. It'll be made available later in the week if you need to come back and get either Jeff or Braxton or Clark's email address. So I just want to give a special thanks to Braxton and Jeff and Clark for your insights and helping all of us better understand the role of the agent and the advisor. So just thanks to all three of you for your time and your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
I'd also like to thank the audience for being here and to all owners for investing in our sport, because without owners, we just simply don't have an industry. We're going to be back in November with another online webinar on the topic of state incentive programs. We'll have several representatives from various states to talk about their state incentive programs, breeding and racing. So until then, we wish you well. Enjoy the upcoming Breeders' Cup Championships, and we hope you visit the Winner's Circle and you visit it often. Bye, everyone.